Time passed like that, and soon the academy resumed again. But for Ash, it held no importance because his path was already set on a different journey. He felt heavy in his heart about leaving Alicia behind, but in the end, he forced himself to accept it. It was like pressing a boulder onto his chest and deciding to carry it no matter how much it weighed him down. His primordial serpent, Snow, was already crossing the ocean on his behalf, so he could not simply call her back just to stay by Alicia's side. He needed to gather the remaining runes as soon as possible. For reasons he could not explain, an unsettling instinct told him that something terrible was approaching. The world itself was being pushed in a direction far different from what was written, and no one could guess what awaited them now. This unknown future pressed against him like a storm, making the urgency to act even greater. Still, he had prepared what little he could for Alicia. He had left her his anchor and a ring, a small artifact designed for her safety. The ring's function was simple but powerful. Should Alicia's mana fall drastically or her life be placed in danger, the artifact would shatter its enchantment, becoming nothing more than an ordinary ring. The moment that happened, Ash would sense it and be able to rush back to her side instantly. It was only a fragile thread of protection, but enough to give him a little peace of mind. Among the runes, the one hidden within the neutral continent was the most crucial. Obtaining it would trigger a chain reaction that would make finding the others far easier. The rune in the Dwarven continent was different, however. Even though Ash knew exactly how it looked, finding such a small object in such a vast land was a challenge without any method to confirm it would be like looking for a needle buried under a chaff. The rune hidden in the deep sea was even worse. Ash had no knowledge of its location, since in the novel it had only surfaced after the world had already collapsed. To search for it blindly would be impossible. That was why the rune of the neutral continent was so important. It was the key to everything else. With these thoughts weighing on him, Ash boarded a train bound for the border of the human continent, the very place connected directly to the neutral continent. The trip took 2 days. He could have used teleportation repeatedly to shorten the trip, but he chose not to. For once, he simply wished to travel by train, to experience the stillness of the ride before plunging into what awaited him. When the train finally stopped and he stepped out of the station, his figure flickered and vanished. High in the sky, Ash appeared again, his gaze already fixed toward the neutral continent as he flew swiftly in its direction. It did not take long before he came upon the colossal wall that separated the two lands. Stretching endlessly across the horizon, it was not just a border but a defense built to withstand calamity. The neutral continent was no ordinary place. Even before the birth of dungeons, it was already called a death zone. From above, Ash could see why. The land below was wild and merciless. Thick forests stretched endlessly, their canopies twisted and dark. Mountains rose like jagged teeth, and rivers cut across the land with violent force, their waters too dark to reflect the sky. Every shadow seemed alive, and even from the air, Ash could sense the weight of countless eyes watching him. This was a land of beasts, a place where survival itself was a war. Countless times in history, monster hordes had poured from this continent, crashing into the walls like waves against stone, testing the limits of mankind's defense. Those were stories of the past, but as Ash crossed over the wall and entered the land, he could feel the truth of them lingering in every breath of air. Crossing the Great Wall and the border, Ash teleported as deep as he could into the wild, and after a certain point, he finally stopped, appearing in a small clearing surrounded by trees. The trees of the neutral continent were large. They were not as towering as the ones in the elf's territory, but compared to the human continent, these still grew taller, thicker, and spread their roots wider, giving the whole forest a wild and untamed feeling. All right, now I just need to cross the bottomless valley to reach my goal. But before that, shouldn't I stretch my body a little? For the past months, although he had fought some roaming monsters and cleared a few low-ranked dungeons, he had not faced anything that could truly challenge him. His body had been restless, and now, standing in the neutral continent, he could feel it stirring with anticipation. Here, there were bound to be monsters worth fighting, high-ranked dungeons waiting to be cleared, and countless broken dungeons spread across the land. Of course, most of these so-called unclaimed dungeons were already in the hands of criminals and shady organizations. They thrived in this continent, hidden away from normal sight, using these dungeons as a constant source of growth and power. "It has been a while. Let's stretch some muscles, shall we?" Ash muttered quietly, a small smile forming on his lips. He already knew where to head. The neutral continent was cut diagonally by a massive valley, stretching like a scar across its length. No matter which direction one started from, walking straight would eventually lead to it. His destination lay beyond that endless valley, so it did not matter where he began, as long as he moved forward. And wasn't the base of the demonic humans and demons located in the neutral continent too? "I should deal with them after I take the rune," Ash said to himself as his gaze sharpened. Dressed in simple clothing, a comfortable pair of lowers and a loose black shirt, he stepped deeper into the forest. His casual walk slowly shifted into a jog, then into a faster run, and soon it turned into a full sprint. Ash darted through the forest like a streak of white, weaving smoothly between the thick trunks. With his recent advancement to the first stage of weapon mastery and the control over his body he had gained, his movements had grown sharper, almost like a dance. He could shift direction at even the sharpest of angles without losing momentum, and that alone thrilled him. Teleporting was efficient, but running was something else entirely. The wind brushed against his face, cool and sharp, while the world around him blurred into streaks of green and brown. His blood rushed with excitement, his heart pumping harder with every step. The forest bent before his speed, yet in that rush, he felt a strange calm, as if everything else was moving slowly while he alone raced forward. This feeling, this is freedom. Just as he was enjoying that rhythm, something suddenly changed. The forest around him warped, and the flow of air grew heavy. His speed faltered little by little, and before he realized it, he was forced to stop in place. Ash narrowed his eyes as the surroundings grew unnaturally quiet. A dungeon break. Of course, the dungeon break had not happened recently, which was clear from the state of the surroundings. The land had blended itself with the forest over time, the scar hidden beneath the growth of trees, shrubs, and creeping vines. Even in the areas where the earth was unnaturally altered, fresh greenery had spread across it. It was proof that a very long time had passed since this break. The soil here was darker, not the deep black, but a heavy shade of brown that stood out against the normal earth. What stood out even more was the grass and plants within the area, all of them carrying an eerie shade of blue instead of green. Ash extended his will outward. He did not possess any true sensing ability. Omni thought heightened his body and sharpened his vision, but it was not the same as an actual sensing skill. Still, his will had always been sharp, able to stretch and feel the world beyond his eyes. Yet even with that reach, he sensed nothing unusual nearby. The forest remained calm, the faint chirp of distant birds and the sway of branches being the only sounds to answer him. He continued moving deeper into the woods. After some distance, the soft rustle of leaves broke the silence. Eclipse was already in his hand, the sheath resting lightly at his waist. Ash straightened his body, his stance calm and steady, like a sword waiting to be drawn. He was trying to take things step by step, increasing his pace slowly rather than rushing forward blindly, so for now he chose to remain still. He let his will stretch again, focused carefully on the bushes where the sound had come from. And soon the full image of the creature formed in his mind. It was a strange fusion of bird and dragon. Its head was that of a rooster, complete with a sharp beak, a bright red comb rising proudly from its crown, and fleshy wattles swaying beneath its chin. Its eyes gleamed with a piercing light, filled with a sharpness that gave it an almost predatory expression. The body beneath that head was encased in hard, blue-gray scales that glimmered faintly like tempered metal. From its back spread wide, leathery wings, their stretched membranes and twisted veins clear even in the dim light filtering through the trees. Its front limbs were thick, ending in long claws that curved like blades, while its hind legs resembled those of a rooster, strong and scaly, the talons gripping the ground with unnatural strength. A long, snake-like tail stretched out behind it, coiled in movement, its length covered in scales patterned with darker stripes. At the very tip, a stiff fan of feathers jutted outward, sharp and jagged, giving the tail a strange, menacing finish. The odd mix of bird and dragon gave the beast a shape that was both unnatural and striking, as though it did not belong to the forest, nor to the world itself. Its size, too, made it more unsettling, standing tall like an ostrich from his previous life, though it was crouching right now, as if trying to ambush him. What the hell is that? The strange beast, or rooster, whatever it was, looked unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was the first time such a creature appeared before his eyes, and there had been no mention of it in any of the books he had read about beasts. Its very existence was a mystery to him. But as his will brushed over the creature, probing its presence, the beast seemed to sense him. The moment his will touched it, the creature suddenly lunged toward him like a streak of lightning, accompanied by a deafening roar. The roar itself was shocking. It was not the cry of a rooster at all. Instead, it sounded more like the roar of a lion, only deeper, heavier, and far more powerful. It shook the air as if the forest itself trembled in response. Using its legs like springs and beating its wings to push itself forward, the beast shot ahead at a terrifying speed, and in the blink of an eye, it appeared right in front of Ash. Its sharp beak glowed faintly, giving off a dangerous light. Ash did not panic. His eyes remained calm as he watched the incoming strike. At the very last moment, he stepped aside, his movements smooth and precise. Eclipse, his Jinn, moved almost like an extension of his body, and the instant the beast passed him, its body was cleanly split in half. Green blood sprayed across the ground as the creature collapsed lifelessly. It is quite weak. From the scales that covered its body and the roar that had carried such force, he had expected the beast to possess strength at least on par with a worthy opponent. Yet it was far weaker than he imagined. That made him wonder, how had such a creature survived all alone in this forest filled with threats stronger than itself? The question lingered in his mind for only a moment before the sound of rustling leaves reached his ears again. Turning his head toward the sound, Ash could not help but almost laugh. From the bushes and trees ahead, more of those strange rooster-like beasts began poking their heads out. One after another, they emerged, and the numbers only grew with each passing second until he stopped trying to count them. So, it was a horde after all. Weaker beasts tend to stay in groups. I should have realized that sooner. Clicking his tongue lightly, he scolded himself for the oversight. Then, taking a deep breath, he slowly moved forward. His steps were steady, and his mind remained calm. He knew very well that no matter how many of them there were, a group of roosters was not enough to make him feel fear. Compared to his strength, they were nothing more than obstacles waiting to be cut down. And as if responding to his advance, the monsters roared in unison. Their cries merged into a chilling sound that shook the trees, and in the next instant, they all lunged at him together. The first beast to enter his range was instantly met with Eclipse. His Jinn moved with a swift and powerful swing, carrying the full force of his body, perfectly augmented by his pure mana. The creature's body was torn in two before it even realized what had happened. Without pause, Ash shifted his stance. His blade turned, and with another sharp strike, he cut down a second beast that came rushing from his side. But things quickly began to change. The moment the second beast fell, the remaining roosters let out a piercing, unnatural screech. Their bodies trembled violently, and then they opened their beaks wide, spewing out streams of fire. The blazing flames shot through the forest in all directions, spreading fast, but before they could touch him, Ash vanished from his spot. In the blink of an eye, he reappeared right in the middle of the horde, in the very place where the flames did not reach. Eclipse moved in his hand, sweeping out in a wide, graceful arc. The blade glided through the air, and as it connected, the scales of the beasts were sliced apart as easily as if he were cutting through butter. It was not that these monsters were weak or that their defenses were lacking. In truth, the beasts were savage-ranked, and some of them were even alpha-ranked. Their power was real, their numbers intimidating, but none of it mattered before Ash. His stats were far beyond theirs, and ever since he had reached the first stage of weapon mastery, he could channel more power of his body with refined precision. Because of this, even without pouring excessive power into his strikes, his swings carried lethal force. A little body enhancement was all it took for him to cut them down. Swish! Ash danced between the groups of roosters, cutting them down like weeds falling before a scythe. His movements were sharp and fluid, his body weaving between their strikes. Whenever flames came toward him, he either vanished through teleportation or twisted another beast into the line of fire, turning it into a shield of flesh. All this time, he had not cast a single spell, nor had he coated Eclipse with mana. His sword alone carried enough strength to cut through them. Soon, the roosters changed their approach. They flapped their wings and took to the air, their screeches echoing through the forest. Fire rained down from above, and some hurled themselves toward him, plummeting like burning comets that split the sky. The impact of their assaults was nothing short of devastating. The ground cracked, trees shattered, and waves of heat warped the air around him. Ash teleported into the sky to meet them, his blade flashing with every swing. He cut them apart mid-flight, but to him it was more of a nuisance than a challenge. I wish I could fly. That desire stirred in him, but he knew flight was not so simple. One had to reach a certain rank before gaining that ability, and for him it was still a little far away. He kicked one of the winged beasts aside and used the recoil to drive himself downward, letting gravity pull him as he slashed through another in his path. Then, vanishing again, he appeared beside the next monster, Eclipse already raised. But just as his blade came down, a piercing shriek split the air. The sound struck him without warning, and his balance faltered in mid-air. Eclipse missed its mark by a few inches, giving the rooster the opening to counter. It opened its beak wide and spewed out a torrent of fire straight at him. The flames would have consumed him in less than a second, so he chose the only path that was instantaneous. Phase. The torrent of fire phased his body, while he vanished after a second, teleporting high above. Ash steadied himself and turned his gaze toward the source of the cry. Looks like the dungeon boss has appeared. There it was, towering above the rest. Twice their size, its body was covered in scales so black they seemed to drink in the light, and its eyes glowed with a deep crimson hue. Those eyes locked directly onto him, filled with madness and hunger. Their gazes met, and the beast let out another cry. This time, the sound felt heavier, like a command that spread through the battlefield. At once, every other rooster froze, then turned their heads toward Ash in unison. Until now, they had attacked in groups of 4 or 5, their assaults scattered and disorganized. But the moment that cry rang out, everything changed. All the remaining ones, nearly 40 in number, launched themselves at him together. They surged from the sky, from the ground, from every direction, closing in like a tide, while Ash hung suspended in the air. Yet instead of panic or fear, a faint smile curved his lips. Thanks for making my task easier, you black chicken. He calmly sheathed Eclipse and brought his hands together. His will stirred deep within, sending a command to his soul. Runes bloomed into existence, glowing faintly as they circled around his body before converging into his palms. Flower of Death. The moment the incantation left his mouth, the world itself seemed to shudder. The temperature around him dropped sharply, the warmth of sunlight dimmed as if swallowed, and an unnatural shadow spread over the forest like the presence of death itself. Blackish lightning crackled across his palms, twisting and gathering until it formed into a black flower, slowly rotating in his hands. Ash's body began to sink toward the ground, falling steadily through the air, the flower pulsing with power above his palms. The monster's face was struck by fear, their body trembling. Their instincts screamed at them to turn and flee, but their momentum was already too great, their bodies pulled forward by their own reckless charge. As the distance between them shrank, Ash lifted the flower above his head and spoke softly. Bloom. The flower collapsed inward at once, compressing into a tiny black dot in the sky. Then, it expanded. There was no thunderous explosion, no dazzling light, nothing loud or chaotic. Instead, the world simply began to die. Everything the flower touched was robbed of life. Plants shriveled and crumbled. The air itself turned dry and brittle, as if manna and oxygen were stripped away together. The ground cracked, the grass withered, and the trees hollowed and collapsed. The roosters never even had the chance to scream. Their bodies froze where they were, skin wrinkling and drying, eyes glazing over as life was sucked out of them. They simply stopped breathing. The bodies of the monsters started to fall one by one onto the ground. Thud! The earth cracked beneath their weight, and a thick cloud of dust rose into the air, spreading across the lifeless area. For a moment, silence followed, and then without a sound, Ash descended and landed on the fractured ground. His figure stood steady amidst the destruction. That was maybe too much, Ash muttered as he looked around carefully. There was not a single thing alive in his surroundings, and the forest, which only moments ago had been filled with noise and movement, now looked more like a horror scene than a battlefield. The spell he had used was a combination of lightning balls and lightning bloom. By merging the features of both techniques, Ash had created a new spell that carried far greater impact. The attack was not only infused with lightning, but also carried the essence of death. His grasp of the death affinity was not strong, yet the countless times he had experienced death himself, along with the many books he had read about it, had given him plenty of insights. Even the books on life affinity had helped him somewhat, because understanding life had allowed him to approach the concept of death more deeply. It was one of the overpowered spells he had developed. If his control over death affinity improved further, then the destructive power of this spell would rise to a whole new level. Though it destroys even the mana cores in their body. That was the flaw. While powerful, the spell did not distinguish between friend or foe, treating everything equally. It consumed and destroyed all that it touched, even the mana cores of the monsters, leaving behind nothing of value. Tisk! Clicking his tongue, Ash was about to move when the sound of the ground cracking caught his attention. He turned his head sharply and saw that the leader of the roosters was still alive. "Looks like you escaped after sensing the danger of my attack. You are quite smart," Ash said slowly, his voice carrying both caution and a hint of recognition. But the eyes of the leader rooster burned with rage, hunger, and madness. It had just witnessed the extermination of its entire pack, and the hatred in its gaze made it clear that it would not forgive. Ash took a step forward, preparing to strike it down, but then his body froze. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. The leader, instead of fighting back, turned around and ran. "What the hell, is it a coward?" Ash thought, taken aback by the unexpected retreat. "Should I follow or not?" he murmured to himself. It would not be difficult for him to chase it down and finish it, but doing so might take more time than he wanted to spend. Time that could be better used hunting other monsters or searching deeper into the forest. After a moment of silence, he rubbed his neck and muttered with a sigh, "Well, I will let it live. If fate is a bitch. If destiny, no, that is also a bitch. Anyway, if I see it again, I will kill it." Without looking back, Ash stepped forward and moved deeper into the forest, not knowing that by letting it go, he had spared not a prey, but allowed a predator to escape. Ash continued to venture deeper and deeper into the forest, and as he moved, he came across more monsters. For the first time, he saw the fantasy creatures he had only ever read about in novels. Goblins, hobgoblins, and even ogres appeared before him. Fighting them was not overly difficult, though the goblins proved to be tricky, relying on their numbers and cleverness rather than strength alone. Deep within the forest, there was even a small goblin and hobgoblin village, hidden among the mountains, and Ash obliterated it with a simple explosion. The sound of the explosion echoed through the forest, drawing more beasts toward him. He had to face them one after another, yet instead of feeling overwhelmed, Ash felt exhilarated. Something about fighting and killing stirred a deep, hidden satisfaction within him. It was not that he was a psychopath who enjoyed killing. No, it was something else entirely. It was the use of his spells, the flow of power through his body, the control he had in the moment, and the adrenaline that surged with every battle. All of this combined into a pleasure that felt intoxicating and addictive. He began to understand what those battle-hungry protagonists from stories felt when there were no worthy opponents left. And when he thought about reaching the peak of his power, a faint ache ran through him. After all, when he finally stood at the top, there might be no one left to fight, no challenge left to push him. That thought made his will to fight blaze even brighter. He sought out every beast he could find, eager for each encounter, unable to stop himself. He did not know if this desire came from within him or from something else awakening, but it only grew stronger with every battle. A week passed in this way, the forest ringing with the sounds of clash, blood, and the cries of dying monsters. Slash! Ash's blade cut through the wolf-like creature that had stepped into his path. He turned his body fluidly, almost as if he were performing a dance, narrowly avoiding a claw that passed dangerously close to his chest. With a precise swing of his empty hand, he severed the wolf's head from its shoulders, using space itself to cut, a trick he had learned over the past week. It was not an exaggeration to say that one real fight could teach more than countless hours of practice. The growth he had experienced in that short time was staggering. His instincts sharpened, his intent became more focused, and the experience he had gained manifested in every movement. The satisfaction from these battles was something no ordinary training could replicate. Even the academy, despite its recent changes, could not provide anything like this. Ash sheathed his sword and sat on a rock, observing the aftermath of his path. A thick trail of blood followed the straight line he had maintained for a full week. He had not altered his course once. Everything in that line had been destroyed. From morning to evening, he fought continuously. At night, he washed himself using water stored in his soul vault or some lake, changed into fresh clothes, and, using absolute concealment, ate his meal and rested. With the concealment active, no beast had ever discovered him, and by hiding among trees or mountains, no beast saw him. And like that, he was never caught off guard once. All in all, he enjoyed this journey immensely. There was no need to talk to anyone. No awkward conversations, no distractions. The only thing that mattered was fighting. The only thing he had to do was continue moving forward, cutting down anything that crossed his path. But even after that, there is not a single change in my status. Even though he had been pushing his body to its limit, sometimes getting injured, exhausting his mana, and straining his muscles, his stats did not grow at all. It was slowly starting to get on his nerves. His potential was enough to reach Grandmaster rank for the rune's sake, but already he felt the wall pressing against him, stopping him from progressing further. Before he could dwell on that thought more, a noise reached his ears. Instantly, Ash activated absolute concealment and teleported onto one of the thick branches of a nearby tree. The leaves around him rustled slightly as he landed silently, blending seamlessly with the shadows and the bark. As soon as he settled, the sound of footsteps grew louder and more distinct, echoing faintly against the trees around him. People. Instinctively, he decided to remain hidden from the approaching group. It was not only caution but necessity, as he was in the neutral continent, a land not filled with ordinary adventurers or ambitious travelers. Instead, it was a place crawling with runaway criminals, demonic humans, and various shady organizations. Everyone knew this, yet no one dared to take action. The neutral continent was vast, and finding the rats hiding within it was a task few could accomplish. To make matters worse, the land was teeming with even monarch beasts, each comparable in strength to the saints of humanity. Ash peeked slightly from behind the thick branch, scanning the approaching figures as the sound of footsteps became more desperate. The forest around him was dense, and shadows twisted with the movement of the leaves, masking the figures as they moved closer. Soon, his gaze fell upon a group of 4 men who appeared around the rock where he had been sitting. The first 2 were twins positioned at the back. Both had black hair and black eyes, appearing to be in their mid-20s. The only visible difference between them was that one had a diagonal scar running across his face. Neither carried visible weapons, but their well-developed muscles betrayed their fighting capabilities. It was safe to assume that they either hid their weapons or were barehanded fighters. The third man looked slightly anxious, as though he had lost something. He was shorter than the others, with a lean and muscular build evident beneath his tight clothing. Brown hair framed his face, and brown eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, searching for something. A bow rested on his back. He was an archer or maybe a scout too. The fourth man immediately drew Ash's attention the most. He was middle-aged and clearly the oldest of the group. There was an aura around him that radiated authority and power, a presence that demanded recognition. His black hair was streaked with white in places, and his eyes were filled with sharp seriousness and intent, reflecting the experience of countless battles and hardships. A sword was strapped around his waist, clearly marking him as a seasoned swordsman and a leader whose presence alone could command the others. Then, suddenly, the middle-aged man's gaze turned towards the branch Ash was hiding on. Ash froze. His eyes twitched. "Don't tell me. What happened, sir?" The twin without the scar asked, his voice breaking the tense silence for a moment. The middle-aged man slowly shook his head, his gaze scanning the forest around them. "Nothing. I just felt as if something, or someone, was looking at me with an unusual intensity. But I suppose it was nothing but an illusion. Maybe I am just tense too." He trailed off, his eyes flicking to the ground, taking in the spread of dead monsters and the blood-stained earth beneath their feet. The scene was gruesome yet telling. Along the entire path they had traversed, the same pattern repeated itself. Monsters lay scattered and lifeless, and the forest bore the marks of a force far beyond ordinary hunters. Sigh. Looks like I need to avoid staring too hard. Some people are quite sensitive. I need to remember that, Ash thought as he turned his attention back to the group's conversation. "There is no one here, Kiro. You said whoever was responsible for all this mess would be here." The Rose, the middle-aged man, said, his tone steady but carrying a hint of caution. Kiro's expression tightened. They had been sent to investigate the destruction near their territory, and they were accompanied by one of the continent's best squads for exterminating any significant threat. Along the way, they had followed a trail of death and destruction, evidence of a highly skilled and disciplined opponent. Every path, every fallen monster told the story of someone moving in a perfect, straight line. Kiro was certain that they had arrived at the last known position of the target. "But there is no one here. Where did that bastard go? Now, because of some unknown person, Sir the Rose will doubt me." Kiro lowered his gaze in shame and admitted, "This is the last place that person stayed. There is no trail beyond here. I do not know where she went after this." He felt a sharp pang of guilt. Perhaps the enemy had sensed their approach and deliberately erased all evidence. Kiro knew he had been too hasty in pursuing the trail, and the thought gnawed at him. Before he could dwell further, a firm hand landed on his shoulder, startling him. "Do not think too much. You brought us to the right place. Look at the dead bodies, they are still warm. Not much time has passed since their deaths. Even the blood is fresh. The enemy is somewhere nearby," the Rose said, his voice calm yet commanding, carrying the weight of experience. "Or perhaps even listening to us right now." At his words, all three men instinctively shifted into defensive stances, muscles tensed, eyes sharp, and senses alert. They scanned the forest carefully, every shadow and rustle demanding attention. "Do not think too much. You brought us to the right place. Look at the dead bodies, they are still warm. Not much time has passed since their deaths, and even the blood is fresh. The enemy is somewhere nearby," the Rose said, his voice steady yet commanding, carrying the natural authority of a man who had faced countless battlefields. "Or perhaps, even listening to us right now." The moment those words left his mouth, a chill passed through the group. All three men instinctively shifted into defensive stances, muscles coiled and eyes sharp. The forest around them suddenly felt heavier, the silence pressing against their ears as if the trees themselves were listening. Now, there is no need to be so tense. I only spoke of the possibilities. My senses are already stretched to their limit, and I do not detect anyone nearby. The roast continued, his calm tones steadying the unease in the air. The others exhaled slowly and allowed their stances to ease, though a faint wariness still lingered in their eyes. There are only two possibilities. Either the enemy is stronger than me, or he is simply good at running away. The roast thought quietly as his hand rubbed over the pommel of his sword, a small habit that revealed how deeply his mind was working. He believed wholeheartedly that the enemy was simply skilled at running away, because he could not bring himself to imagine that someone stronger than them would choose to remain hidden instead of showing themselves. Kiro, move in a straight line and follow the path. Jax and Max spread to the left and right. Do not go too far and retreat if you find nothing. I will stay here and study the traces more closely. Yes, sir. All three of them replied in unison and moved instantly, their bodies blurring as they dashed into the forest with practiced speed. Branches trembled under their movements, and the rustle of leaves trailed behind them before the forest grew still once more. Ash saw all of this unfold, and he realized the truth after sensing the sheer weight of mana that surrounded their bodies when he activated Elemental Sight. Their outlines glowed with condensed energy, and the pressure alone made his chest feel slightly heavy. All three of them are Grandmasters, and that middle-aged man, he is legendary rank. As soon as he realized that the enemy was an S-ranked person, Ash became even more cautious. It was his first time encountering someone who had stepped into the legendary rank, and he knew well that starting a losing fight was no different from digging his own grave. But I am confident that if I abuse my immortality and spam spells simultaneously and ambush him, I can kill him. Even so, he admitted that if his ambush failed, there would be no choice left but to run. Against someone who had already grasped the power of a domain, even escape was uncertain. There was no guarantee what would happen if he decided to confront the opponent head-on. After all, the enemy has the power of domain. Looks like my fight with the monsters has attracted some sort of organization. It is obvious they are either all criminals or assassins. It was obvious from their words and the manner in which they acted. Now the question that rose in his mind was simple. What should he do next? It's obvious. I will follow them to their base. A devious plan formed in his mind, as his eyes stayed locked on the Rose who crouched among the corpses, observing the slain monsters closely. The legendary ranker's sharp gaze traced every detail, and Ash could tell from the way he moved that nothing in this place was escaping his notice. Except him, of course. The cuts are clean, and there is no trace of much mana used here. Whoever killed it did it with just the pure strength of their body, nothing else. The Rose crouched down and examined the monster's corpse, his eyes carefully tracing every wound. His mind, however, was restless. But on the way, there were many unusual scenes. There were craters left behind, and strange residues of lightning clinging to the ground and trees, as if storms had torn through this forest. Some places even looked like they had been pulled straight out of a nightmare, scarred with emptiness, as if death itself had swallowed that patch of land and left nothing behind. It was hard to believe that one single person could be responsible for all of this, because the scale of destruction simply did not make sense. Yet he was certain it was not the work of a group. Kiro's unique trait allowed him to see traces that normal eyes could never detect, and it was because of that ability that he had become one of the best trackers the organization had ever produced. The Rose trusted that skill completely and did not doubt him in the slightest. As he stood there lost in thought, the sound of footsteps returned. His subordinates approached from different directions, their figures emerging from between the trees. Turning around, the Rose gave them a deep look, and under his heavy gaze, they immediately gave their reports. There were no signs of anyone moving in a straight line, Kiro reported. There was no one. No one. The twins replied one after another, their voices firm yet cautious. Hearing their words, the Rose turned his gaze back to the corpses at his feet. His expression hardened as he sank deeper into thought, his hand slowly resting on the pommel of his sword. After what felt like a long silence, he finally spoke. Let's return. If there is a disturbance again near our territory, I will ask the hounds to be released." Kiro and the twins froze for a moment, their faces paling as soon as the word hounds left his lips. It was no secret that the hounds were not ordinary soldiers but a special unit trained for only one purpose: hunting and killing a target without fail. What made them terrifying was not just their strength, but their inhuman nature. To complete their mission, they would go to any length. They did not care about their bodies. They felt no pain, and once unleashed they never stopped until their prey was torn apart. Every single one of them was monstrously strong. Their raw physical power was monstrous, and their way of fighting was pure savagery, more beast than human. To be pursued by them was not a hunt. It was a death sentence. "Let's go," the Rose ordered at last, and his figure blurred as he moved forward. The others immediately followed, none daring to speak. Their silence carried unspoken pity for the unfortunate soul who would one day be marked as prey for the hounds. Only when the squad disappeared from sight did Ash finally stir. He had been waiting, still and patient, and now he began to follow. His body flickered through the trees with short bursts of teleportation. Each jump carried risk. A few times his footing faltered, and he nearly slipped from the branches, his balance almost breaking. His heart pounded at the thought of being discovered, but each time, relief came when the Rose showed no sign of noticing. Learning quickly, Ash adjusted his movements. He no longer stared directly at the group, keeping their figures only in his peripheral vision, tracking them through the corner of his eyes. It was safer that way, and it ensured he would never lose them. The chase went on, day bleeding into night and night into day, until 2 long days had passed. At last, the group slowed. They stopped in an open clearing at the base of a towering cliff, surrounded by thick forest. Ash narrowed his eyes, his thoughts sharpening. "There are many trees here, and the location screams a hideout to me." It was obvious to him, at least, after all, he had been following these people from the start. If he had come here alone without knowing anything, even he would never have suspected that this place could lead to a hidden base. On the surface, it looked like nothing more than a quiet clearing beneath a cliff, surrounded by dense trees. Just then, all 4 of them pulled out a token and supplied mana into it. The tokens glowed faintly and, in the very next moment, they all vanished without leaving behind a trace. Ash froze where he stood. He had expected some sort of gateway to appear, perhaps a door of light or a ripple spreading across space, but instead it looked as if the tokens themselves were the only key to enter. Even then, Ash did not move and continued to stay hidden within the cover of the trees. His instincts told him to remain still, and his memory served as a harsh reminder of why. The incident in the Dragon Continent was still etched in his mind with crystal clarity. When, despite all his efforts, he had been caught by the Dragon Elders. The memory of their overwhelming presence and the helplessness he had felt in that moment made him cautious, unwilling to take even the smallest unnecessary risk here. Taking a slow breath, he activated Elemental Sight. His vision shifted, and the world around him transformed as countless glowing runes and invisible lines revealed themselves. On the ground below, hidden from normal eyes, was a massive runic array carved into the earth and filled with the energy of space mana. He could even see the intricate structure inside it, puzzle-like patterns formed by interconnected nodes. Ash had studied these types of arrays before and immediately recognized them. It was a protected teleportation array, one that could only be activated if a proper key was used. Although an array master might be able to decode the array with enough effort, it was never a simple task. It usually requires both time and careful calculation. I don't believe that there will be a single surveillance around the gateway to their organization. It was obvious that some kind of security was bound to be present. Perhaps not literal CCTVs, but other forms of magical surveillance, hidden formations, or sentries placed here to guard the entrance. That was exactly why Ash did not even think about teleporting directly above the array. One wrong move and he could be discovered immediately. Let's solve the puzzle first. The reason array masters needed so much time was simple. They could not see the array directly with their own eyes. But Ash was different. His elemental sight allowed him to see every glowing line and shifting node clearly. So he began to work on it mentally. It was a difficult process. Elemental sight consumed his mental energy continuously, forcing him to pause often, close his eyes for a moment, and then begin again. Time passed slowly. Minutes turned into hours as Ash carefully traced the flow of mana, adjusting and recalculating the solution in his mind. After 3 long hours, his vision was heavy, his eyes droopy from strain, but finally the solution was clear. Nice. I have memorized the whole pattern. A faint smile appeared on his lips. It had been exhausting. To him, it felt like solving a Rubik's Cube without being able to touch it, only turning it again and again inside his mind until every piece fell into the right place. But now, every path and every connection of the array was carved clearly in his memory. Still, his body demanded rest before he could proceed. With a light exhale, Ash teleported away from the clearing. It was already around 3 in the afternoon, and his body felt heavy with fatigue. He decided to rest now, and once night fell, he would return to implement the solution and finally enter the place. Feeling refreshed and his mind back at full power, Ash made his move. He took out a potion from his soul vault and gulped it down, the cool liquid sliding down his throat and sending a sharp tingling sensation through his chest and limbs. It was an invisibility potion whose effect lasted for only 15 seconds, so he had no time to waste. His body began to disappear, its edges fading first, and then his entire form shimmered until he was completely invisible. With a silent, controlled motion, Ash teleported directly above the ground where the array lay. Absolute concealment was already activated, so he did not have to worry much about being sensed, and he relied on the invisibility potion to hide him from any form of magical or mechanical surveillance that might see him. Even though it was not possible, he remained cautious. 1 second. Ash appeared above the ground, and as soon as his feet touched the ground, his hands moved with precise, practiced gestures. He channeled his mana carefully, initiating the movement of the nodes on the array. A faint hum resonated beneath him as the first nodes shifted, each one responding slowly at first, as if awakening from a deep slumber. 2 seconds. The nodes started moving more clearly now, resisting slightly as if rusted machinery finally turning its cogs. They spun one by one, slow at the beginning, but gradually gaining momentum as Ash's mana guided them with careful precision. Sparks of energy flickered along their edges, illuminating the array with faint, rhythmic pulses as it responded to his mental commands. 3 seconds. The nodes began to increase in speed, flowing along the path Ash had calculated. More than 5 moved simultaneously now, each one snapping into alignment with almost musical synchronization. The process felt like watching a complex machine spring to life under a master's control, every piece locking into place exactly where it should. Their movement accelerated explosively, responding perfectly to Ash's will, the nodes sliding into precise lines as if tracing invisible rails only he could see. For a second, when the last node fell into position with a soft, metallic click, the array activated. Mana surged from within it like a contained storm breaking free, spiraling outward in bright threads of energy. Ash vanished from his place, leaving only the faint hum of the now active array behind him. 5 seconds. The world dissolved into swirling shades of violet and black, a familiar pressure twisting and folding around him, connecting and warping the space around his senses. The sensation was disorienting, a weight pressing against his chest and a vertigo that left his stomach queasy. Yet he focused and remained calm. Soon, the sensation vanished, and Ash appeared in a dark cave. Small lamps were placed on either side, their flickering glow casting shadows that stretched unnaturally along the rough stone walls. The dim light revealed the outline of the cave, enough to see the weapons pointed directly at him. 6 seconds. Ash had already expected something like this. He knew the weapons were not truly aimed at him but were reacting automatically to the array's activation. Perhaps a system had been triggered, designed to alert anyone in the vicinity when the array was disturbed without the key. 2 men held spears, their muscles tense under the dim glow of the lamps. Mechanisms that resembled guns and missile barrels were fixed towards him. One of the men muttered as he pressed his watch, confirming Ash's thoughts. "There is no one here, damn it." You had me scared for a second there. The array must have malfunctioned. Call the damn array masters. The men began arguing quietly, their voices low but sharp, tense with frustration. Ash ignored them, scanning the room carefully, noting the positions of the guards and the subtle hum of the automated devices. 7 seconds. He did not move but teleported again, sliding silently through the cave toward the exit. From this vantage point, the light at the end of the tunnel was visible, a promise of open air and freedom. Within 2 precise teleports, he appeared outside the cave, landing softly on the uneven ground without disturbing a thing. 8 seconds, and a whole new world unfolded before him. Damnation! That was the only word that echoed in his mind as he took in the sight in front of him. What Ash witnessed was not some petty criminal organization, but rather a whole underground city that seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Lanterns hung from ropes stretched high above, their flames swaying in the draft and casting uneven light across the crowded path below. The damp stone floor gleamed faintly, slick from moisture dripping down the jagged walls, and each uneven step echoed with the shuffle of boots and the low hum of voices. Stalls pressed tightly against one another, their patched canvas roofs sagging under the weight of smoke and dust. The displays were cluttered but rich with temptation. Piles of exotic fruit glowed like jewels in the firelight, jars of strange powders sparkled faintly as if alive, and rows of weapons gleamed with a sharpness. In one corner, a butcher hacked at slabs of meat while steam rose from cauldrons nearby, filling the air with the thick, clashing scents of spice, grease, and iron. The crowd moved in constant motion, cloaks pulled close, faces hidden behind masks or scarves. Conversations came in quick, clipped exchanges, whispers drowned by the rattle of coins and the sharp crack of deals being made. A man slipped a pouch of gold across the counter, while another vanished into the shadows with a bundle wrapped too tightly to reveal. Nothing here lingered. Nothing here was safe. Above it all, the cavern stretched into layers of stone walkways and bridges, where watchers leaned against railings, their eyes catching the lantern glow for only a moment before vanishing back into the dark. They stood like vultures, observing the crowd below. 9 seconds. In a single sweep, Ash took it all in, every shadow, every movement, every flicker of light, and his gut told him the truth. What the hell is Black Market doing here? The realization hit like a sudden chill running down his spine, sharp and undeniable. 10 seconds. There was no time to linger. His invisibility would last only 5 more seconds. He teleported directly into one of the empty, shadowed streets, where darkness clung to the walls like a protective cloak. 11 seconds. Appearing there, he immediately pulled a half-black cat mask from his soul space and fitted it on his face. At the same time, a long black cloak draped itself over his shoulders, the hood pulled low. The fabric was worn and frayed at the edges, softened from previous use, which was exactly the effect he wanted. Ash had prepared for all scenarios, and now he was glad he had. He carried more than 10 cloaks, half new, half worn, like this one, each ready for a different situation. 12 seconds. Ash waited until his concealment faded naturally, then stepped from the shadows and melted into the moving crowd. His absolute concealment was not active, but it was unnecessary. Eyes naturally fell on him, but the rune of concealment in his body blocked any probing, leaving the gazes to vanish as if he had never been noticed. People likely assumed he was stronger than they and returned to their own business. This was normal here. There were no rules in the black market. Only one law existed. Power and authority dictated everything. He did not activate his concealment because it would do more harm than good. In a place packed with people, he was bound to cross into someone's line of sight, and if they saw him but could not sense him, their curiosity would flare in unpredictable ways. And that was the last thing he wanted. Damn it, why is there a black market here? It was not anger so much as annoyance born of hindsight. The presence of the black market should not have surprised him. The neutral continent was exactly the kind of place that would attract one. Even if the novel never mentioned it, that did not mean such a trade hub could not or would not exist here. Logically, the neutral continent was a treasure trove. Endless dungeons spilled monster cores, rare body parts, ancient herbs, veins of glimmering ores, and countless other commodities that could not be found anywhere else. For everyone living in the neutral continent, the black market was the easiest and safest way to exchange such dangerous treasures. Anything worth value in this land inevitably passed through its shadowed halls, and the market made it possible to bypass the treacherous journeys that once crossed continents. It was dangerous, chaotic, and utterly essential to survival and profit alike. The market itself looked like something pulled from an old fantasy tale, with crooked wooden stalls, dangling lanterns swaying above crowded alleys, and lantern light reflecting off damp stone floors. It was a living, breathing chaos, entirely opposite to the neat, modern fantasy bazaars he had witnessed. He had once been to the black market in the human continent, and it was much more advanced than this one. Completely opposite would not be an understatement. With no rules to hold anyone accountable, it felt like a volcano ready to erupt at any misstep. Yet the trade ran smoothly on the surface because everyone knew who held the real power. Whoever controlled the black market could banish a vendor, strip them of their livelihood, and force them to risk the dangerous borders and the massive Great Wall surrounding the neutral continent. That alone ensured most crimes happened in shadows, executed with precision and silence. If you committed a crime and were never caught, then in practice it was as though nothing had happened. I should have realized it sooner. But it is even better that black market is here. Ash's lips curved into a slow, calculating smile. His original plan had been simple. Slip into the organization, steal treasures, and then leave unnoticed. Now, however, the entire black market lay open before him, a chaotic trove of unimaginable riches. The thought of what he could claim here made his pulse race and his body tingle with anticipation. Each shadowed corner, each hidden stall, each whispered deal was a new opportunity, and the possibilities made his mind whirl with excitement. My body is trembling just at the thought of what I will find in this place. Ash weaved between the crowd, stopping at some stalls to see if he would find anything interesting. Yet, for now, nothing he saw managed to stir his interest. Even though the black market was considered a major hub of trade, the prices here were nothing short of astronomical. A simple piece of bread that would normally cost a single copper was being sold for an entire silver coin. Unlike the other continents, where one could choose to rely on online transactions, this place recognized only the weight of physical coins. In the neutral continent, most people were runaways, wanderers, or outright criminals, so it was only natural that few had bank accounts to begin with. Here, gold, silver, and copper were the only true currencies, and nothing else held value. As Ash watched the items being displayed on the stalls and in the shops, listening to merchants loudly praise their wares while buyers argued and bargained back, he could not help but wish for something else. If there was some kind of inspect skill with me, I might have been able to find a treasure hidden among the worthless trash being showcased here. He truly wished he could create an inspect skill or some ability related to it, but for now he could only wait. As soon as he obtained the rune in this continent, he would instantly create a skill like that. And unlike the main characters he had once read about, who started their journeys with such convenient skills from the beginning, his own path was different. His starting point was harsh, and his story would no doubt have its share of bitter chapters before it turned for the better. Anyway, this is most likely only the first layer, and if I want to find any precious items, I need to go deeper. No matter which continent, the black market was always the same in structure, operating in layers that separated the weak from the strong. The first layer was where common smugglers and thieves sold their stolen goods. Bargaining here was noisy, and among the piles of useless junk, one might occasionally stumble upon something useful. It was a place for the poor, the reckless, and those who had nothing left to lose. The second layer was slightly more refined and offered better goods. One could expect to find solid steel weapons, low-grade enchanted items, rare herbs, and different poisons. It was the place where small guilds and wandering mercenaries came to buy tools that were reliable enough to survive, though nothing here could truly be called extraordinary. This layer belonged to those who had managed to rise just above the filth of the first. The third layer went a step further, where the stakes grew higher and the rewards more tempting. Beast cores, blood of magical creatures, spell scrolls, and pieces of monster anatomy that could be refined into artifacts were traded here. It was dangerous, yet it was also where one first came into contact with the taste of true power. The fourth layer was where influence and power openly gathered. To enter this place, one needed strong connections, and without them, there was no chance of stepping inside. The famous auction houses also existed here, making it the most peaceful and most comfortable place to conduct business. Wealth flowed freely here, and its value rivaled kingdoms. And then there was the fifth and final layer, the one no one could casually step into. Even Ash did not know what to expect there, for no outsider was ever allowed entry. Only the executives of the black market held that privilege. Rumors whispered that the final layer hid the deepest secrets of the black market, but no one had entered there to confirm whether those whispers were true. But Ash had different thoughts. The last layer will be the place for the black market executives to live, and with how secure it is, I would say all the true goods of the black market are stored on the last layer. How did he know? Well, you could say that was simply the perk of reading too many novels. If he were the one in charge of the black market, he would have done the same thing. He would have placed all valuable items on the last layer and added a hidden security system, one capable of teleporting everything away the very moment an attack was detected. By the time an enemy broke through the defenses and finally reached the deepest floor, all the treasures would already be gone, leaving nothing but empty walls. His thoughts drifted like this as he continued moving forward, eventually making his way to the second layer of the black market. He stepped onto a glowing teleportation array, watched closely by 4 heavily armed guards, and in a blink of light, his body vanished from the spot. The entry fee was no small matter. Just to step into the second layer, Ash had to hand over 100 gold coins. The rule behind it was clear. No beggars, no penniless wanderers, and no people with nothing to offer were allowed to enter. But Ash's goal was neither the second nor the third layer. The third might have offered something of decent value, but Ash did not just want something decent, he wanted only the very best. So, without hesitation, he paid another 1,000 gold to pass into the third layer, and then an additional 10,000 to reach the fourth. During this process, he also changed his appearance. The tattered cloak he had been wearing earlier was removed and replaced with a clean, expensive-looking one. He had worn the old garment to blend in with the crowd above, but such a look would have drawn suspicion here. To remain unnoticed, one had to adapt to the surroundings. In the lower layers, looking poor helped you blend in. In the upper layers, only those who looked refined and confident would be ignored. Naturally, a question arose. How had Ash even managed to enter the fourth layer when entry required both connections and invitations? The answer was simple. He had found someone with the invitation letter to enter. As for that person, Ash had killed him in silence. The man had been a grandmaster, strong enough to terrify most. But before Ash, who possessed absolute concealment and transcendent step, his strength meant nothing. Killing him was not a matter of force but of patience, and patience was something Ash had in abundance. After ending the man's life, Ash stripped him of his belongings and stored his body inside the very storage ring taken from his finger. Later, he casually disposed of it by tossing the ring into a sewer, ensuring that no trace would ever be found. The man's identity did not matter to Ash. All he knew was that he had been a human named Adam Hart, and that knowledge alone was enough to discard him. When Ash finally appeared on the fourth layer, the difference struck him immediately. The air itself felt different, cleaner and fresher compared to the suffocating stench of the lower layers. The streets were wider and paved with smooth black stone. Lanterns of glowing crystals lit the paths, and shops stood neatly in rows with elegant signs gleaming above their entrances. The atmosphere here was like stepping out of a slum and into the heart of a luxurious city district, where wealth and power spoke louder than anything else. The space above stretched impossibly high, as if the very mountain had been hollowed from within. Jagged stone formations hung down like frozen spears, their edges sharp and threatening, glinting faintly under the soft glow of enchanted lights. The sheer size of the cavern made Ash pause. He could not even be sure if this was a natural formation expanded over centuries or a colossal space carved out with deliberate intent by some ancient power. The ceiling arched so high it almost looked endless, like a cathedral of stone frozen in time. Below, the ground opened into wide streets and sprawling plazas, each broad enough for large groups to move freely without colliding. Buildings of black stone and reinforced metal rose in straight lines, their designs neat and imposing. Some of the taller structures towered over the rest, their surfaces glowing faintly with runes of protection, light weaving across them like veins of power. They gave the entire place a sense of order and authority. Along the avenues, smaller shops and clustered stalls spilled warm light from tall windows, illuminating the passers-by. Together, they created a steady, pulsing rhythm of life that kept the entire layer alive with movement. Above the streets, lanterns and magical orbs floated, some suspended by delicate chains, others hovering by enchantments. They gave off a gentle light, not harsh like torches, but steady and even, illuminating every corner while leaving little room for shadows. Compared to the dim and chaotic glow of the lower layers, this place felt refined, controlled, and carefully maintained. The sheer scale of the fourth layer struck Ash with its weight. There was room here for thousands to walk without crowding, while the ceiling stretched so far above that it felt as if the sky itself had been buried underground. This was Ash's first time entering the fourth layer. In his earlier visits to the black market, when he had come searching for a ride to the Dragon Continent, he had never been fortunate enough to find someone alone carrying an invitation. Without such a pass, this level had been closed to him. Now things were different. The invitation stolen from Adam Hart made several things clear. Whoever Adam had been, he was expected to attend an auction in 2 days. That was where Ash was headed, the towering building rising above all others, the place where the auction would be held. Before that, he needed to collect the auction catalog, a book that would list some of the treasures prepared for that day. Even glancing at it would give him an idea of the possibilities awaiting him. His thoughts quickened with anticipation. This was not simply about attending an auction, it was a chance to gain access to the very best that the black market could offer. 2 days passed in what felt like a fleeting moment, swallowed by his preparations and his growing expectations. For Ash, these 2 days passed in nothing but relentless spying and gathering information from every corner of the fourth layer. The place was massive beyond comprehension, stretching in every direction with layers of streets, buildings, and hidden alleys, and it was impossible to uncover everything. Still, he managed to learn as much as he could about the upcoming auction. The black market of the neutral continent held 2 types of auctions. One occurred every few months, offering rare items and useful treasures, while the other, held once every 3 years, was far more significant. The 3-year auction gathered the best and most valuable goods that the black market had collected over the years, making it the pinnacle of opportunity. This time, many items immediately caught Ash's attention, promising possibilities too tempting to ignore. In addition to studying the auction schedules, Ash infiltrated the auction house itself, a task that demanded extreme care. Every hallway, every doorway, and every corner had someone watching, their eyes scanning for any irregularity. He had to move silently and cautiously, using the last of his precious invisibility potions, which were rare and difficult to find. Despite the challenge, he discovered important details. The auctioned items were nowhere in the building. The warehouse was empty. This confirmed his earlier suspicion. The most valuable goods were likely stored in the elusive 5th layer, or they had not yet been transported to the venue. The auction house was enormous, more than just a single hall. Several smaller halls served minor transactions, but the central grand auction hall dominated the structure. It was vast, with high ceilings and polished floors, designed for large gatherings of elite buyers and powerful figures. The building also contained a transaction vault and a treasure chamber. The treasure chamber was empty, except for a large runic teleportation array etched into the floor. No guards were present, leaving the space unprotected. With no one watching, Ash moved freely. No one wasted effort guarding an empty vault after all, which further confirmed his suspicions about the 5th layer. He took his time studying the runic array, analyzing its intricate nodes while remaining concealed. He knew there could be surveillance, so he stayed hidden and silent, observing the array from afar. The array's complexity was greater than the previous one, but after 6 hours of meticulous work, he finally cracked it. If he was not hiding, the task would have taken far less time. Though he did not activate the array immediately. Doing so now could alert others, and that would ruin his plan. Ash intended to attend the auction first, observe how the goods were transported, and only then make his move. Also, during his exploration, he stumbled upon a secret area used for illegal activities, including slave trading and other dark dealings. The area was dangerous and complex, and Ash could not investigate it thoroughly because of even higher security and surveillance. Other than these things, Ash found nothing. But he was not foolish enough to assume such a large place would lack hidden rooms or secret passages. Yet luck was not on his side this time, and he found none. Right now, Ash was standing outside the auction house, dressed in a long black coat whose fabric was heavy yet flowed smoothly with each subtle movement. The coat was embroidered with delicate golden patterns along the sleeves and inner lining, catching the light in soft, shifting gleams. It hung open to reveal a high-collared black shirt that clung to his muscular frame, layered with thin golden chains resting lightly against his chest. His trousers were sleek and dark, fitted cleanly to his legs, with small leather straps and clasps accenting his knees and ankles, adding subtle structure to his outfit. Polished black boots completed the ensemble, with thin strips of orange cloth tied along the edges, a sharp yet intentional contrast. Black gloves covered his hands, giving him a composed, purposeful look, and the entire outfit radiated a mixture of quiet elegance and underlying danger. The half-black cat mask covering part of his face, combined with his dyed black hair, gave him an almost fantastical appearance, the kind of presence one would expect from a storybook hero or a legendary figure. With no absolute concealment active, his natural charisma seemed to spill outward, impossible to ignore. Every movement he made carried a sense of effortless grace. Confidence flowed from him, not forced, not heavy, but calm and smooth, as if he belonged to a higher plane than those around him. There was a magnetic quality in the calmness of his expression, a quiet strength that made people look twice. His aura exuded a mixture of mystery and authority, drawing eyes naturally, making him feel untouchable simply by existing. Many people paused to look as he entered the auction house. Their attention lingered for a heartbeat before they returned to their tasks, though not without stealing occasional glances. Women's eyes followed him with curiosity, while men muttered curses, irritated by the effortless grace he commanded. One of those men was Max, the son of the leader of the Black Serpents, a notorious criminal organization famous all over the world. Max carried himself like someone used to having everything handed to him. Even on the neutral continent, backed by his father's influence and wealth, he lived as a spoiled, confident figure. Despite his arrogance, he was a skilled fighter, already holding the rank of master at 22, a mark of undeniable talent. His main flaw was his lust for women and his domineering tendencies. Max's golden hair and dark eyes, along with a well-maintained physique, made him undeniably handsome, and even the mask covering part of his face could not hide it. He had arrived with a woman he had taken an interest in, hoping to display his wealth and power. Yet she ignored him entirely, her attention captivated by Ash as he entered. From the glimpses of Ash's exposed skin, the intensity of his eyes, the subtle curve of his lips, and the deliberate grace of his movements, it was clear that his charm and presence outshone Max completely. Even partially masked, he dominated the room like a candle burning steadily against a storm, making everything else seem secondary by comparison. That bastard thinks he can steal my spotlight? He'll regret daring to shine brighter than me. He was burning with rage inside, but he held it back. If there had been any other woman with him at this moment, he would have killed her on the spot for daring to look at another man while standing next to him. But the woman walking with him now, the one he wanted to win over, was the daughter of the well-known organization Crimson Vultures. Since their fathers were good friends, Both of them were strolling around the auction house together while the elders enjoyed their reunion. His cold gaze followed the man as he walked to the reception desk and handed the woman there a letter. To Max's annoyance, she blushed while working, her hands moving nervously. Then, as she read the letter, her expression changed completely. Her eyes widened in shock, and her voice stumbled as she spoke before finally handing over a black token. Ash took it without a word and started walking toward the stairs. So, that bastard came to the auction too? Max's lips curled into a grin, his tongue brushing across them without him realizing. In his mind, he already imagined the perfect way to strip Ash of his dignity and pride before every single pair of eyes present here. Though he was also curious about the contents of the letter for that lady to react like that. Meanwhile, the woman next to Max continued looking at Ash as he started climbing stairs, her presence quiet yet striking. Her smooth black hair framed her face, and her bright orange eyes glimmered like embers from behind her mask. Combined with the deep red outfit she wore, it created a sharp and beautiful contrast that drew the eye. And then, just faintly, she smiled. Ash stared down at the token in his hand. Its surface was pitch black, and on it gleamed the golden number 1. It was clear that this token granted him the first VIP suite in the entire auction house. The receptionist's surprised reaction earlier still lingered in his mind. It was not because of his charm. She had reacted that way the moment she read the name on the letter. Her shock had been too genuine to mistake. Looks like I messed up big time. The person he had killed, Adam Hart. Could it be that he was someone important? Ash had no answer, but his instincts told him that much was true. Even so, he remained calm. If things took a bad turn, he could simply escape, and there was nothing here that could stop him. At most, it would be a little troublesome if the auction itself ended up ruined. Step by step, he climbed the stairs, his pace steady and unhurried. The silence of the place was almost comforting. A guide had been assigned to him, but he had refused. He wanted peace, and more importantly, he did not want anyone close enough to recognize him. After all, if Adam really was famous, then even a small slip could expose him. Thankfully, he had dyed his white hair black before coming here. Without that, his appearance would have already given him away instantly. After climbing several flights of stairs and walking along the quiet corridors, Ash finally reached his private suite. Using the token like a key, he placed it on the slot, and the door opened with a soft sound. He stepped inside, closing it behind him, and for the first time since entering the auction house, he allowed himself to breathe in peace. Luxurious. That was the only word that could define the VIP room number 1. The moment Ash entered, he felt as if he had stepped into another world entirely. One that whispered wealth in every breath. The booth was vast, easily large enough to fit a small apartment, and every inch of it was designed to overwhelm the senses. The floor was covered with thick velvet carpets embroidered with golden threads, soft enough that each step felt like walking through warm clouds. The faint shimmer of the threads caught the light, creating a subtle gleam that made the room look alive. The walls were lined with enchanted crystal panels that glowed softly, their light adjusting on its own to the perfect warmth and hue, shifting like sunlight passing through morning fog. It gave the room a comfortable brightness, never too harsh and never too dim, the kind of light that made one forget time. At the center of the room stood a long sofa made from rare beast leather, its surface polished to a dark shine. A faint golden pattern traced along the edges, glowing softly like breathing light. In front of it was a low glass table, its surface etched with glowing runes that pulsed faintly every few seconds. On top of it rested trays filled with delicacies, steaming food that released mouth-watering aroma, sliced spirit fruits glistening with juice, and crystal glasses filled with fine wines that shimmered like liquid rubies. The air inside the room was warm and fragrant, carrying the faint scent of spirit blossoms mixed with a trace of sandalwood. It was relaxing to breathe, clearing the mind without dulling it. Enchantments hidden in the corners of the room kept the temperature perfectly balanced, neither too cool nor too warm, always steady and pleasant. Even the viewing window was no ordinary glass. It was enchanted with advanced runic magic that let him see everything below. The crowd, the stage, even the smallest inscriptions on an item, with perfect clarity. At the far end stood a wooden cabinet, filled with crystal bottles containing rare liquors. Their glow and scent spoke of age and quality, and Ash could tell each one might cost a fortune. Near it, a discreetly placed door led to a small washroom, the kind of thing only a room of the highest rank would have. Everything about the place screamed perfection. It was not just a private booth. It was a world of comfort crafted for the kind of people who believed that status and money could bend everything around them. Well, I'll be damned. Ash let out a soft whistle as his eyes roamed around. The sight was far beyond what he expected, and for a moment, even he had to admire the sheer effort that went into building something like this. He looked around like a curious child seeing something new, taking in every small detail before finally sitting down. The sofa sank under his weight, wrapping around him in a way that made it hard to move again. It was soft, deep, and shaped to pull the body into perfect rest, as if every curve had been crafted for comfort. Now, I'm even more suspicious about who this Adam is. Hope nothing spoils the auction, though. He leaned back and relaxed, resting his arms on the sides while his eyes studied the hall beyond the enchanted window. People had already started to gather below. The faint murmur of conversation reached him, muffled through the barrier. Some VIPs had arrived long before him, while others were still entering. The auction hall was massive, circular in shape, layered with seating tiers for different levels of guests, each marked by glowing symbols of rank. Every VIP booth had the same one-way enchanted glass like his. The people inside could see out clearly, but no one could see in. Above each door, a small crystal light indicated whether the room was occupied or not. Green meant unoccupied. Red meant occupied. Ash's eyes shifted from booth to booth, quietly observing the layout and the security patterns around. The guards below were strong, moving in well-trained formations, and there were surveillance orbs hidden under the ceiling that swept across the hall every few seconds. As the sound of footsteps and quiet chatter filled the grand hall below, the lights dimmed slightly, signaling that the auction was about to begin. Ash leaned back comfortably, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the room. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. It was almost time for him to move. Firstly, he called for room service and told the attendant not to disturb him for the entire duration of the auction. She was only allowed to enter if he won any bid, to deliver the token of that item, and then leave immediately after that. Anyway, he wasn't planning to bid on anything, so that meant no one would be coming to disturb him. He wasn't worried about cameras in the room either. VIPs had certain privileges after all. Still, for security, the entire auction hall was covered by an anti-spatial field. It prevented anyone from teleporting or accessing their space rings, ensuring that no one could sneak in or steal anything. Ash didn't know how the auction house had managed to get their hands on such a powerful artifact capable of maintaining this kind of field, or who they had found to inscribe an array like this. Even though he had already experienced something like this in Dragon Continent, but still those were dragons with vast knowledge and a long legacy. It was expected of them, but the humans filled him with little doubt. But he didn't think too deeply about it. Since the field or array, whatever it was, didn't restrict him, it wasn't his problem. His teleportation still worked perfectly fine. Once again, runes are showing their powers. Then he took off his coat, turned it around, and wore it in reverse. His whole outfit turned black, blending perfectly with the dim light of the room. Then he activated Absolute Concealment Asterisk, and his presence vanished like a drop of ink dissolving in the shadows. I wish my old armor were here. If it were, he wouldn't have to go through all this. Everything would have been so much easier for him. But alas, letting out a soft sigh, Ash took out a smartphone and an earpiece. He placed the phone neatly on the table, connected the earpiece, and glanced toward the stage where the host of the auction was walking up, ready to start. The next moment, Ash's figure faded completely. He appeared inside the treasure chamber, crouched behind the top of a pillar where there was just enough space to hide. The narrow gap was dark and cramped, but it gave him a perfect view of the entire chamber below, especially the large array at the center and the guards that were watching everything with hawk-like eyes. The air here was thick with mana, humming softly from the runic array on the ground. Seeing the empty chamber with only guards and an array, Ash's guess proved to be true. Auction items were indeed teleported at the time of the auction. Ash adjusted his position, making sure not to make any sound. As soon as he settled down, a voice echoed clearly in his earpiece. "Welcome, esteemed guests, to the Grand Auction Hall." The lights dimmed slightly as a spotlight bloomed on the stage, revealing a tall, elegant woman stepping into view. The hall grew quiet in an instant, as though the very air had paused to admire her. She wore a deep crimson gown that shimmered like liquid fire under the light, hugging her figure with a grace that could only belong to someone born for the stage. Her hair, black as obsidian, cascaded down her back in soft waves, and her eyes held a golden glint that seemed to pull attention like gravity itself. Each of her steps was measured and confident, carrying both warmth and authority, a blend that drew admiration even from those who thought themselves above such things. A faint smile curved her lips as she stopped at the center of the stage, her voice carrying clearly across the grand hall. "Welcome, esteemed guests, to the grand auction of the Black Dawn Pavilion. It is our honor to host the finest hunters, nobles, and merchants from across the continent tonight. We thank you for gracing us with your presence. Tonight, treasures beyond imagination will find their rightful owners. Let your bids speak your worth, and may fortune favor the bold." Her voice was smooth, calm, and perfectly paced, with a melody that made even a simple sentence sound like a spell. The crowd responded with a polite round of applause, though whispers followed right after. "She's gorgeous, even more than last year," one young man murmured, eyes locked on her like a moth to flame. "Yeah, but that beauty's poison. You think a woman like her would even glance at you?" His friend whispered back, grinning. "Still worth dying for." Another sighed dreamily, earning a few chuckles from the seats around him. Some of the older merchants smiled knowingly, while the younger ones tried their best to act composed. Even in the VIP booths, where the wealthiest guests sat, a few eyes lingered longer than they should have. Ash, sitting silently in his hidden spot within the treasure chamber, could faintly hear the applause from his earpiece. He didn't care much about who she was, but he could admit her voice had a calm charm to it. The host raised her hand slightly, signaling the start of the event. "Let us begin," she said softly, and with a graceful wave of her wrist, the lights shifted once again. And with that, the auction officially began.